The champagne glass felt slippery in my palm as my mother's voice cut through the restaurant's gentle murmur. I wish you were never born. The words didn't register as sound first. They registered as sensation, like my rib cage suddenly constricting, squeezing all the air from my lungs in one violent rush. Around the private dining room at Delmonico's, conversations died mid-sentence. Forks paused inches from open mouths. Even the pianist in the main dining room seemed to sense something terrible happening, his melody trailing into uncertain silence. I stood there at the head of the table I'd reserved, paid for, carefully planned, wearing the navy blazer I'd bought specifically for this night, and felt 28 pairs of eyes turn toward me, my colleagues, my professors, my manager who'd mentored me through 2 brutal years, all of them waiting to see if I would crumble the way my mother's tone suggested I always did. But something else rose instead. Something that had been building beneath my skin for 27 years, pressing against the careful silence I'd maintained my entire life. My name is Claire. I'm 27 and I just graduated from Stanford with my MBA. This is the story of how I learned that sometimes the only way to be seen is to stop trying to be visible to people who refuse to look. The dinner had started exactly as I'd hoped. Warm introductions, genuine laughter, my manager raising his glass with words I'd never heard directed at me. Claire is one of the most capable young consultants I've worked with. She's destined for great things. For 3 perfect minutes, I'd felt the unfamiliar weight of pride settling across my shoulders, like a cloak I'd finally earned the right to wear. Then my father's voice, low but perfectly audible. Compared to a doctor, it doesn't measure up. I'd grown up in Rochester in a 2-story house that looked peaceful from the outside, the kind of place where neighbors waved and lawns stayed trimmed and nothing ever seemed wrong. Inside, there was an order I learned early and never questioned. Everything orbited around my younger sister Ashley, the golden child, the one whose sneeze prompted my mother to fetch tissues like she was preserving a national treasure, whose participation ribbons, the kind every kid received just for showing up, got framed and hung in the hallway, while my regional math competition first-place certificate got a distracted, "That's nice," before being filed away in a drawer I never saw opened again. I was 14 when I won that certificate. I'd carried it home like it was made of glass, terrified the corners would bend. My mother didn't look up from folding laundry when I laid it in front of her. "Ashley's volunteering at the hospital today," she'd said instead. "Isn't that wonderful? She's making real impact." Real impact. Those 2 words became the measuring stick for everything. Saving lives, caring for people, having purpose. Nothing I did, no matter how hard I worked or how much I achieved, ever qualified. But I kept going. Coffee shop shifts at 5 a.m. through high school, rushing between classes and work and home, where I'd study until my vision blurred. 3 jobs in college, tutoring, cleaning offices, restocking shelves, because bills don't care about fairness or favoritism. My parents never asked how I managed to send money home every month. They only asked when the next payment was due. When I got into Stanford for my MBA, my academic advisor cried. My mother nodded and mentioned Ashley's ER rotations, as if my acceptance letter was a footnote in my sister's ongoing saga of excellence. Still, some stubborn part of me believed this dinner would be different, that maybe achievement at this level, Stanford top consulting firm, the life I'd built entirely alone, would finally tilt the scales. Now, standing at Delmonico's with my mother's words still echoing in the sudden silence, I understood with crystalline clarity. The scales were never meant to balance. They were designed to keep me exactly where I'd always been. My colleague Sarah spoke first, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm sure your mother didn't mean—" "Oh, I meant it." My mother's laugh was light, almost casual, the way someone might comment on the weather. "Claire takes everything so seriously. Ashley never causes this kind of drama." The room tilted. Something inside my chest cracked open. not breaking, but splitting like a seed that had been pressed beneath soil too long, finally pushing toward light. I set my champagne glass down with deliberate precision. The soft clink against the white tablecloth felt impossibly loud. "Excuse me," I heard myself say, though my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else entirely. I didn't look at my mother. I didn't look at my father, who sat perfectly still with that familiar expression of polite indifference he'd perfected over decades. I didn't even look at my manager, who half rose from his seat as if to follow. I just walked out, heels clicking against hardwood in sharp, uneven beats that matched my racing pulse. I walked for 20 minutes in the rain, my mind blank, my body moving on autopilot through streets I'd memorized during late-night stress walks. The Seattle night wrapped around me like a curtain, cold air catching the edges of my breath, rain beginning to fall in sheets that blurred the city lights into streaks of gold and blue. I stood on the sidewalk outside Delmonico's, the sound of distant traffic humming in my ears, and for the first time in my life, felt completely untethered. Not free. Not yet. Just severed. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but nothing came. Just a numb, echoing exhaustion that had been building for years, maybe my entire life. Every memory flashed by in rapid succession. Forgotten birthdays, achievements dismissed with distracted pats on the back, financial obligations I carried without question while Ashley's tuition checks got delivered with handwritten notes about how proud they were of her dedication. By the time I reached my Bellevue apartment, my blazer was soaked through and my hands were shaking. I kicked off my heels, sat on the floor in the dark, and stared at the blinking router light like it might tell me what to do next. My phone buzzed, 11 missed calls, one text from my mother. "You embarrassed us. I hope you're proud of yourself." Proud. The word twisted in my chest. Proud was something they'd never felt for me, but expected me to manufacture on command for their benefit. Something inside me shifted, not with a snap, but with a quiet, steady movement like tectonic plates, finally settling into their true position. I opened my banking app. 3 automatic transfers sat in the queue. My parents' utilities, Ashley's medical school tuition balance, the lingering portion of the family mortgage I'd been covering since my father's temporary setback 5 years ago. For 1 second, my finger hovered. The old version of me, the one who lived on obligation and swallowed every slight, fought to breathe. Then I hit cancel. 1, 2, 3. Each confirmation clicked like a lock turning, like a door I'd been holding open for 27 years finally swinging shut. The silence in my apartment changed. It wasn't empty anymore, it was peaceful. Michael showed up the next day with takeout containers and wine he pretended not to care about, but clearly did. "Just checking if you're still alive," he said gently, stepping over the pile of books near my door. Michael had been my closest friend since our first year at Stanford, one of the few people who'd seen me struggle through those early consulting years without judgment. He never asked for more than friendship, and I was grateful. I didn't have space for anything else then, and he seemed to understand that without needing it explained. I sat on the floor again, this time with him beside me, steam from the food rising between us like an anchor pulling me back into my body. "I think," I said slowly, testing the words, "I'm done." He didn't interrupt. He didn't tell me to reconsider or remind me that family is family or deploy any of the expected platitudes. He just nodded, eyes soft with understanding. "About time you saved yourself for once." Something steadied inside me. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, I wasn't drowning. I was surfacing. 3 weeks passed without a single word from my parents. Not an apology, not an explanation, just silence. The kind they'd always demanded from me, except now it was pointed back at them, sharp enough to cut. And strangely, I didn't miss them. Not the way a daughter is supposed to. I missed the idea of them, the version I kept trying to invent so I wouldn't feel alone. Letting go of that illusion was painful but also clean, surgical. Work became my refuge. The restructuring project I'd been assigned swallowed entire days whole, but I didn't mind. For the first time, I wasn't pouring myself out just to be overlooked. People listened when I spoke. Clients deferred to my judgment. My manager handed me responsibility like he trusted me to carry it because he did. When a local business magazine asked to feature the project, I said yes. I didn't mention my family in the interview. I didn't have to. The journalist said she wanted to highlight resilience, how you grow when the ground underneath you keeps shifting. When the article went live, my inbox filled with messages from strangers, people who'd endured parents who only loved the version of them that stayed small. Their words felt like breadcrumbs on a path I hadn't known I was following. But quiet is never permanent, not in families like mine. On a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks later, I came home after a 12-hour day, exhausted, still in heels, blazer slipping off my shoulder, and found 2 silhouettes through the frosted glass of my apartment door. For a moment, I thought it was a delivery. Then I heard my mother's voice, sharp and insistent. "Claire, open the door. We know you're there." My stomach dropped. I didn't move, not because I was afraid, but because I no longer owed them urgency. Later, I realized they must have been waiting in the parking garage, watching for my car. They'd always known where I lived. I'd never hidden it from them. But this was the first time they'd used that knowledge as ambush rather than invitation. When I finally opened the door, they swept inside without waiting for an invitation, like my home was just another thing I maintained for their convenience. My father took the couch. My mother paced once, then faced me with tight, brittle anger radiating from every line of her body. "We need to talk," she said, "about Ashley." Of course it was about Ashley. It always was. My father folded his hands stiffly. Her internship ended unexpectedly. Budget cuts. Her tuition balance is overdue, and if it isn't paid by Friday, she'll be asked to take a leave from the program. I didn't sit. I didn't blink. I just stood there, watching them with a clarity I'd never possessed before. "And?" my mother snapped when I didn't immediately respond. "We need your help." The audacity landed like a slap. They hadn't shown up to apologize. They hadn't shown up to ask how I was or why I walked out of that restaurant or what they'd done to cause a fracture big enough to swallow our entire relationship. They came because they wanted me to fix their favorite daughter's life again. When I didn't answer immediately, my mother's tone sharpened. "Claire, don't be petty. Ashley is your sister." I laughed, short, bitter, not amused. "I paid her tuition for 3 years. I covered your bills, the mortgage, groceries when money got tight. I worked myself raw so this family didn't fall apart. And you stood in that restaurant and said you wished I'd never been born." My father straightened, jaw tight. "We were angry. You made a scene." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You made the scene. I just walked out of it." The air thinned between us. I could feel something inside me settling, solidifying into unshakable clarity. "You're our daughter," my mother said, her voice rising. "Family is family. You can't just—" "I can," I cut her off. "And I am." Her eyes flashed. "Claire, you're being unreasonable. You owe us—" "I owe nothing." My father's face reddened. "We raised you. We gave you everything." I shook my head slowly. "You didn't raise me. You drained me. You took every ounce of effort I had and poured it into Ashley, like I was just a reservoir that existed for her benefit. And when I finally succeeded despite you, not because of you, you told an entire room of people who respected me that you wished I'd never existed." The words hit harder than I expected. Maybe because it was the first time I'd said them out loud, maybe because they were true. My mother froze. My father's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. For the first time in my life, they looked small. Like 2 people standing in front of a truth they couldn't control or spin or dismiss. I walked toward the door, but not to leave, to open it. I held it wide, letting the hallway light spill into the room. "If you came here to apologize," I said quietly, steadily, "I'd listen." They said nothing, not a single word. "But if you came to ask for more?" I looked each of them in the eyes, unshaken. "That conversation ended the night you disowned me." My mother scoffed, crossing her arms. "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this. Someday you'll realize you need your family." And that was the final shift. The moment everything inside me aligned. A clarity so sharp it felt like breathing for the first time in 27 years. I stood tall, taller than I'd ever felt in my life, and said the words I never imagined I'd have the strength to speak. "Then consider me as if I never existed. Live your lives as though there was never a daughter named Claire." They went still. My father's lips parted. My mother's face blanched, color draining like I'd physically struck her. The entire room, the tension, the air, the space between us, froze like someone had pressed pause on reality itself. For the first time in my entire life, I wasn't the one shrinking inside the silence. I nodded toward the doorway. "It's time for you to leave." My mother hesitated, searching for some angle, some leverage she no longer possessed, but there was nothing left to take, nothing left to control. She turned sharply. My father followed slower, like a man walking away from a fire he didn't expect to spread. When the door finally clicked shut behind them, the quiet that filled my apartment wasn't empty. It was mine. That was the last time I saw my parents in person. 3 weeks later, my mother sent one text. "You'll regret this." I didn't respond. I never did. 6 months after that night, I learned through Michael that Ashley had to take a leave from medical school and eventually transferred to a less expensive program. Whether she completed it, I never found out. I'd meant what I said that night. I was living as though Claire the daughter had never existed, and in the space where that obligation used to live, I finally found room to breathe. In the days that followed, I waited for the familiar ache to return. The guilt, the second-guessing, the instinct to fix what wasn't mine to fix. But it never came. Instead, there was a strange stillness inside me, a peace I'd spent my whole life chasing without knowing it existed. Work surged forward. Our project closed with results that exceeded every forecast. When the client renewed the contract and expanded the scope, my manager pulled me aside with a smile I hadn't seen directed at me since childhood. "You're ready," he said, handing me the leadership position I'd fought for without realizing it. This time, I didn't question whether I deserved it. The article went viral. Messages poured in from strangers who'd grown up invisible like I had. People who whispered thank you for saying the words they couldn't. Reading their stories felt like standing in a room lit by faces I'd never met, but somehow understood completely. One night I stepped onto my balcony, the Seattle skyline pulsing softly beneath a layer of mist. I thought of the girl who spent years trying to earn love from people who refused to offer it freely. She was gone now. In her place stood someone steadier, quieter, but undeniably whole. I wasn't the daughter they wanted, but I became the woman I needed. And if you've ever carried the weight of a family that couldn't see you, know this: you are not alone. The moment you stop trying to be visible to people who refuse to look is the moment you finally see yourself clearly. Maybe that's not the ending they wanted for me, but it's the beginning I needed. Share your story in the comments if this resonated with you. And if you want more stories about finding your voice when the world tries to silence it, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.